Oregon's made some coaching staff additions. Yes, additions to the coaching staff, indeed, on the offensive side of the ball. And it's a really good indicator for the Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get yourself started. Lots to get to on today's show. Lots and lots and lots. Let's get into it, shall we? So there are two new offensive coaches for the Ducks who are going to serve in an analyst role. There's not a new coordinator or anything of that sort. But let's start with Matt Lombardi. You may or may not recognize the name. He was an analyst with the Raiders this past season. He was on Matt Rule's staff in Carolina as well. His tie to the coaching staff comes via his stint at Louisville when Will Stein was the quarterback there. He was on the coaching staff. So they've got that connection. So Stein brings in somebody that he knows. The more interesting hire of the two, there are two moves made on that side of the ball, is Dante Ellington. So he was the wide receivers coach this past season and co-special teams coach for Missouri State, who compete at the FCS level, the level at which I do play-by-play for those of you who don't know, for that school on the wall right there, Southern Utah. Go T-Birds. But they had over 300 passing yards a game this past year, which was fifth in all of FCS. The team was not great, but he was the passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach. And, what I like about that move in particular, I like that, Oregon's able to attract someone of Lombardi's caliber. Obviously, you have the connection to Will Stein, but guys go from being an offensive analyst in the NFL to being a position coach or a coordinator either in the NFL or in college all the time. I'm pretty sure the Iowa Hawkeyes just hired an offensive analyst from the Green Bay Packers staff to be their offensive coordinator. So this is someone that's going to be in a very much secondary or even tertiary role with the Ducks in terms of coaching this year. But I'm a fan of having those sorts of guys around. But Ellington's the more interesting of the two for two reasons. Number one, he comes from the state of Missouri, which you may remember has produced a quality recruit a time or two. Oregon was after Williams-Nwaneri in the 2024 cycle. He ended up staying in his home state and choosing the Tigers over the Ducks. But there's a couple players. One I know of, a wide receiver that Max Torres has written about over at Ducks Digest, that Oregon is after in the 2025 cycle. I wonder if the tie is there. Lanning's also originally from the Missouri area, so I wonder if this isn't, at least subtly or somewhat, a little bit of a recruiting pitch, or a recruiting move, I should say. But the Ellington addition is noticeable to me because this is a guy who's hungry. His background tells you that he is someone who wants to make it in the coaching world. He wants to progress. He's going to go wherever the opportunities are. And I love having those sorts of people on a coaching staff because you want to have guys that are going to hustle, because the hustle is usually indicative of the recruiting, which is why I brought up the Missouri factor. So he's got a background coaching JUCO ball. And as Dana Altman, who I'm talking about later on today's show, has mentioned before, if you're willing to coach at a junior college, you're a grinder. Just full stop. If you're willing to go and live that life, it is not glamorous. It is about coaching ball. It is about being committed to the craft, honing your craft, perfecting it. Same goes for the players. Those guys that are willing to, there are some junior colleges that have really nice facilities, that have, good fan support and everything like that. But most junior colleges you go to, you're not playing in front of packed houses. You're not playing in the biggest games that you want to play in your career as a player or a coach. And you're not playing in the most glamorous of circumstances. And if you're a coach, you're not doing it for that much money. If you're a player, you're certainly not really getting any significant money there in the NIL front. So Ellington's got the background in the junior college ball. He's also been at Tennessee Tech. Eastern Kentucky, who's in, and actually two teams that are in Southern Utah's conference, the United Athletic Conference, both Eastern Kentucky, which I can tell you is a ways out there, and Abilene Christian. So he's been around, and that resume says to me he's someone who wants to work, who wants to bust his butt to do whatever he can to find a great opportunity. And seeing Oregon as that next great opportunity for him, or at least as a next step. I don't know that he's a long-term guy on the Oregon staff, but I'm always here for hustlers. So those two guys were brought in as analysts after another analyst for the Ducks, Colin Lockett, was hired to be the wide receivers coach at UC Davis. Again, what I was talking about, analysts are often looking for position or coordinator jobs to go try and find. But having an analyst come in from the NFL who's just going to be in that sort of role with the Ducks, and Ellington as well, Matt Lombardi, the first guy that I mentioned there, I think that's great. Great news for the Ducks. But specifically, in college sports, you want to have a commitment, a level of buy-in from your university, your president, your athletic director, your fans, your alumni, your donors. Everyone's got to be involved. It is a communal effort to be successful. I read recently that Oregon has upped their salary pool to around $8 million. So that is the amount of money that Dan Lanning has got to disperse to his assistants, which I assume is partially why he's able to make these sorts of hires. These guys are not pulling in, major dollar figures or anything like that. And I don't think details got released, at least not that I have seen, about who exactly is making how much. But I did read, I think James Crepea had at the Oregonian, that there was going to be a position coach who would be making $1 million, which is kind of nuts. But guess what? That's what the going price is. And what these moves, combined with that news on the salary front, indicate to me is something that I want to continue to see for Oregon. And that's having an all-in approach, an investment. Be willing to pony up the money that you've got to get the best coaching staff possible, to commit to an NIL fund, to get the best players that you can in the transfer portal and from the high school ranks. I think that all that is good news for the Ducks. Lots to get to on today's show. I'm going to start with this question. We'll see how quickly I get through it. But this question came in from Andrew. How do you see them implementing Jay Harris? He's a transfer from Northwest Missouri State, is, I believe, where he came from. It was a Division II school. Because they had that big back in Dowdell last year and never used him, opting instead for Lamar, I just struggled to see them altering course and using Harris properly, like the big back that he is, to get all the goal line touches that transferred to Boise State. Cyrus Habibi-Likio is the big back that you are thinking of there. I'd be most interested to see if a role like that arises. That was under a different coaching staff. So Jordan James was a short yardage goal line back. Maybe Jay Harris could fill that role. I'll touch more on that after I give a well-deserved shout out to Sam, because I was talking about Jordan James earlier this week on the show, and I posed a trivia question, and I said, man of my word, just like the Joker in The Dark Knight, of course, but maybe in a less mischievous and violent context. I said that someone would get a shout out if you were the first to comment Jordan James' lone receiving touchdown from this past season. A lot of you had that lickety split right off the top of your head. Sam was first to the punch, though. Sam, props to you. It was indeed against Utah. It was the audible that we all saw in Ducks versus them, where the staff was going, what did he just check to? No, we're fine. We're fine. And everything like that. And Bo Nix was talking in the presser about, if we saw field pressure, we were going to shift to a Texas route, and Jordan James caught the touchdown, and that was a great day for the Ducks. But he's not the only running back in Oregon's backfield next year. Jordan James, no Whittington. Is there going to be a number 3? Is that kind of role available? That's complicated. eBay Motors is not complicated, though. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. So the Jay Harris conversation is interesting because is Harris the sort of big-bodied back that could fit into a Cyrus Habibi-Likio type role? Yes, he absolutely is. He showed on film he's capable of more than that. But if you're looking at Oregon's backfield, it's Jordan James and Noah Whittington. I won't be surprised if either one of those guys is the number one back, or if Whittington comes back fully healthy, if he's ahead of Jordan James. Remember, Noah Whittington was ahead of Jordan James on the depth chart last year, and they were the same players. It's not as if Jordan James was, a completely different guy, and he's just, he did explode because he got more touches after Whittington went down with an injury, but they saw who he was going into the offseason. They saw who Whittington was, and Whittington was above him on the depth chart. Now, coming off an injury and James putting a full season together, yeah, we'll see, because I think Jordan James is very good. But is there room for a third running back? The answer is yes. I mean, we saw in 2022, it was Bucky Irving, it was Noah Whittington, and then it was Jordan James in a short yardage spot. And if you're asking me who's more qualified from a physicality standpoint to be that short yardage sort of guy, between Jaden Lamar, a 4-star running back recruit who's, played sparingly over his first season with the Ducks, and Jay Harris, who was a D2 All-American and, looks little bit like Najee Harris out there, or Derrick Henry, the way he's just kind of a big, bruising, imposing back? Yeah, the answer is probably Jay Harris. Now, this comes down to a matter of philosophy. Does Carlos Lachlan and Will Stein and Junior Adams and the rest of the offensive coaches, Matt Lombardi and Dante Ellington among them, do they now want to have that sort of guy? Do they feel they need to? Because James is such a good short yardage back. If he ends up being the number one guy ahead of Whittington, well, maybe you just go to James in the goal line. But maybe you want to keep him fresh and have him be at his best between the tackles and not take, physical blows all the time. I don't know. I don't know. But I think that Harris could be the sort of guy that Cyrus Habibi-Likio was. And I think that role was really effective. I'm not opposed to it. It tips your hand a little bit, but if you know what you're doing offensively, which Will Stein does, you can have a guy on the field who's designed for one particular purpose and still be able to outthink the defense there with different packages and plays and concepts and everything like that. So curious as to all your thoughts. As always, drop them in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or @LockedOnDucks. Those are ways to get in the mailbag as well. If you want priority access, go over to Subtext. Join the flock, and you can get a chance to talk with me one-on-one all the time. I check it far more often than I do social media, which I still respond to, of course. But you also get priority mailbag access. You get my breaking thoughts and news reactions and whatnot. So this question came in from over there. Kind of intended for Max Chadwick the other day from PFF, who was just fantastic, by the way. If you missed that show, that was yesterday, you got to go listen to that. Everything you can need to know about Oregon going into the NFL draft, Max Chadwick had you covered. So when you look at Oregon's roster every year, I think it's a fair question, and I might have to dive into this later on an episode next week on the show, to say, okay, how many NFL players does Oregon have on the roster? And that's going to be rather telling as to how good Oregon's team is going to be. You look at the best teams Oregon has had. There weren't that many NFL guys on the 2010 National Championship team against Auburn. That was a unique situation, though, because Chip Kelly was doing things that nobody had ever seen before. And you look at the 2014 team, you say, yeah, defensive line, boom, first-round picks, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead. Yeah, you had, before he got injured, Ifo Ekpreolomu back there at safety. Yeah, he was an All-American. Mariota, Heisman winner, number 2 overall pick. Here's an interesting question. How many of those guys, how many NFL caliber guys do you think Oregon's got on the roster for 2024 right now? I don't know. But this question came in from the Subtext community. What's Jordan Burch's draft ceiling and floor? Is the team, and secondly, is the team that drafts T. Ferg getting a discounted Brock Bowers? Ferg has so much potential in the right scheme. So I don't think that Burch can be anything better than whatever Brandon Dorles's draft stock is this year. Now, Burch has some physical traits that I think he's a little bit taller than Brandon Dorlus, but they play somewhat similarly. I think you could put Birch inside, but he's best on the outside. Dorlus, I think, is better on the inside, but can also play out. I think that Birch's ceiling as an NFL draft prospect is probably around third or fourth round, which is probably where Dorlus is going to get taken. I think that Birch can become a better pass rusher. I think Dorlus is better at that. I think Dorlus gets by his man more often, but Birch has got him in the strength and physicality, right? When you think Jordan Birch this past year, you think of plays where he's just strong-arming a tackle who's trying to move him in the run game, and he just says, no, you're not doing that, and then he makes a play in the backfield. Whereas Dorlus is more about the agility and the hand movement. So that's where I think Birch can make a step forward to improve his draft stock. Certainly he's someone who I think just based on his physical stature and the traits that he's got will be drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. But how high? That's going to depend on what he puts on the field this year and how productive he is for the Ducks without Dorlus there. And, certainly there are some good players along that Oregon defensive line, but Birch should be the headline guy in that group. As for Terrence Ferguson, nobody is Brock Bowers. I love T-Ferg. I've been in the T-Ferg fan club since before the 2022 season. I remember coming on this show and talking about how big I felt his potential was, and he had a breakout year, and he had a great season last year, and he's coming back, and that's huge for Oregon's offense. I think Terrence Ferguson is a slightly more athletic version of Luke Musgrave at Oregon State. So Musgrave got taken by the Packers and was a part of their offense this year. And when I watch T-Ferg, I don't think there's anything that Musgrave can do that T-Ferg can't or that T-Ferg isn't actually better at. Like contested catches, T-Ferg's a stud. He has got phenomenal hands. I think he's a good run blocker. He can maybe improve a bit in that sense, but T-Ferg's a stud. That's an NFL tight end. I'm very confident saying that. I'd be shocked if he doesn't get drafted next year. Is he a Brock Bowers type? No. He's more of a mid to late round pick that you bring onto your roster and say, look, you're not going to be our number one guy necessarily, but I see no reason why he can't be everything that Musgrave is, but slightly better. And Musgrave is a good player in the NFL. So that's what I feel for those two guys right now with regards to their NFL draft stock. Still a lot to get to today. Goodness gracious, we're just jam-packed, and it's early March. Spring football hasn't even started yet. March 14th, first spring practice. I look forward to reading the first practice report and reacting to it here on the show. Trio of questions coming in from Bud. Given your broadcasting responsibilities with Southern Utah, what are the prospects that you will be able to attend any Duck football games in person next season? I get this question quite often from Duck fans, which is very humbling because it means that you want to meet up with me there at the game, which I love doing, by the way. I saw a bunch of you at the Pac-12 championship game. I've seen a couple of you just kind of out in public before when I'm actually back in the state of Oregon, which I plan to be again this summer. As for Oregon football games specifically, there is a plan in motion. It has not been set in stone, but I am indeed going to attempt to work it out to go to the season opener against Idaho, which would be a blast because Oregon is going to win that game and they'll score a bunch of points. And so I will, of course, keep you all updated on everything of that sorts. The Washington game also has potential, not a guarantee, but we're a long ways out from this sort of stuff. We're less than 6 months. Hey, how about that? Less than half a year away from Oregon football season starting. There we go. So we're less than 6 months away. And that first game, I've got my eye on it. I have even already spoken to my dad about, hey, can we make this happen? Are we going to go to the game? Because he might be interested in attending as well. So, yeah, that's a game that I've got my eye on. And then the Washington game to end the regular season as well. Possible, but not sure, because that depends on what the schedule comes out for Southern Utah men's and women's basketball and such. So, good question. I always appreciate hearing that sort of stuff. Dana Altman came out swinging recently. He says he's not going anywhere. Are you going to check out Amazon Fire TV? Well, if you're not, then you should, because Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, which is right around the corner, or the college basketball tournament, also around the corner, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. How about that? Great price. That includes all of us at Locked On, by the way, and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. I'm a big food guy, by the way. Cooking videos, that's all that's in my Instagram feed, pretty much. Well, that and Family Guy. Check out the Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv to learn more. All right, couple questions here from Bud, which build off of one another, so bear with me. Dana Altman was asked recently about rumors that he was considering retirement, and he shut them down emphatically, saying, I'm not going anywhere unless the administration asks me to go, i.e. he'd be fired. He does not look like someone who's planning on retiring. There is reason as to why he feels that way, despite Oregon on the brink of missing their third straight NCAA tournament. So let's start with let's start with the second question I got from Bud. We'll go back to the first one here on this subject. He says, Evan Miyakawa has a PhD in statistics and is a data scientist. He took a look at the top 100 men's basketball teams in the country when it comes to missed games by rotation players. The Ducks have nearly 50 combined missed games by rotation players this season. Colorado is second in the country. Oregon is number one in games, said Miyakawa, missed, and it's not even close. Given that fact, and that our best players are freshmen, shouldn't we want to have Dana back next season? That's an excellent question. A great data point to bring up. Shout out to Bud for the research, by the way. I saw this graphic as well. It's one of those kind of XY axis charts. Boy, I'm a long way removed from high school and college math and such. But all these teams are kind of grouped up in the middle about how many games you missed by rotation players, right? You got your X and your Y axis, your Y and your X axis. And Oregon is just way above everybody else in the pack. Way above it. Ducks are 19-10 going into this final week. They've got Colorado on Thursday, Utah on Saturday. Win those two games, they could move back into the bubble conversation. But I don't think that's particularly likely, though I'm going to watch anyway because, of course, I am a hopeless romantic when it comes to Oregon sports sometimes. But I have very much been leaning in the last couple of weeks towards wanting Dana Altman to return. Now, before the season started, I said this needs to be an NCAA tournament year or we're going to have a serious conversation. And the conversation is going to be had. Let's see how this final week plays out. Let's see how the Pac-12 tournament plays out. If Oregon goes and drops a dud the likes of which women's basketball did, and look, they needed to move on from this season. Just needs to end, flush it, get better in the offseason. They've signed a 5-star point guard as Kelly Graves, but boy, they lost 79-30. Now, if Dana Altman does that in the postseason, that could be one thing because the optics could be bad. Maybe momentum swings against him, but missing 50 games from rotation players, that's an unconscionable number. It's more than everybody else, and it's more by a lot. And yet, Dana Altman is once again looking like he's going to have a 20-win season. So to say that the program has taken a step back is accurate. To say that it's bottomed out is inaccurate. This is not what bottoming out looks like for Oregon basketball. And so, yes, Oregon fans should have hopes of getting to or should have an expectation of getting to the NCAA tournament every year, and not getting there is a disappointment. I am in that camp. Context does matter, And again, I'm going to reserve full judgment, but I am 80% leaning towards I want Dana Altman back. Because as Bud points out, if Dana Altman leaves, who are you going to bring in that can guarantee all three of Jackson Shelstad, KJ Evans, and Mookie Cook all return? Because that's your future. After this year, Jermaine Couisnard's done and Folly Dante's done. I think Brendan Rigsby could maybe have one more year. I would love to see Bam Tracy come back. I think he brings a lot to the table. But what are you going to be able to accomplish if Altman leaves and then some combination of Shelstad, Evans, and Cook hit the portal? What are you going to do? Who can come in at that point? So that was Bud's other question, which is if Dana Altman does not return as Oregon's men's basketball coach, which apparently would have to be getting fired by Rob Mullins, the athletic director, would Washington State coach Kyle Smith be a good candidate to replace him? I'll reiterate again that Altman stated he's not going anywhere, were his words. So I don't think Oregon fans should expect Dana Altman to not be the head coach. That doesn't mean there's a 0% chance. That does not mean there's a 0% chance. That's how he felt on that day. Maybe he feels different a month's time. Maybe. I don't know. But I think he's frustrated with the constant lineup turnover and the injuries that he's had to deal with. And that's a really challenging thing for a basketball coach. You're trying to tweak lineups all the time. But it's different when you're able to tweak lineups like Mark Wasikowski's doing successfully over the last couple of games, might I add, versus what Dana Altman has had to do this year, which is being forced to tweak lineups. So I think it's a really tough spot. If Dana Altman were to leave, Kyle Smith would be near the top of my list. He might be at the top of my list. That guy is a heck of a basketball coach. You look at what he's done with the Cougars up in Pullman. If he came down to Eugene with Oregon's resources, yeah, he'd be, I think, a really, really good hire. Does that mean that that's going to take place? I don't think so. Because I don't know that you can look at this season and say this is all Dana Altman's fault. Has he been perfect? No. No coach ever is, by the way. No team ever is. No player ever is. I think Dana Altman had some moments where I was wanting to rip out what little hair I keep on top of my head. But has he done a good job given the challenges he's had to deal with? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would certainly look at Kyle Smith if Dana Altman were not the coach. There are other candidates that would be out there. I struggle. I'm struggling right now. But again, I could change my opinion depending on how the end of the season goes. If Oregon wins their next two games, they're squarely back on the bubble, and at the very least, they'll be carrying momentum into the Pac-12 tournament, where an automatic bid is up for grabs. So we'll see how it goes. Oregon's been in this position before, by the way. 2019, Oregon had to win the Pac-12 tournament to get in with Peyton Pritchard and Kenny Wooten and Lou King and Paul White and that squad. They went to the Sweet 16. Awesome year, but they were not getting in if they didn't win that Pac-12 tournament, which they did. So let's wrap with a little baseball talk, because I know many of you follow Oregon baseball. I follow Oregon baseball, and they just had a good couple of games. So GCU is the 3-time defending WAC regular season champions. I think they've won a conference tournament or two in there as well. They are not a slouch of a baseball program. And Oregon went in to Phoenix, and they hit the ball. And they hit the ball a lot. They hit the ball a lot. And it was great. And Oregon picked up 2 consecutive wins. And the first game, Oregon was, they got off to a good start. They had bases loaded, no outs, only got a run, gave up a 2-run homer, took the lead back. It was kind of back and forth. But the long ball is starting to come into play for the Ducks. And this has been a hallmark of the Mark Wasikowski era for Oregon baseball over the last couple of years, which has been very successful. They hit the ball. They hit the ball, they hit the ball, they hit the ball. Mason Neville has homered in 3 straight games. Jacob Walsh came off the bench for a pinch hit 2-run homer in the first game. Then he homered again in the second game. Jeffrey Hurd hit another homer. These balls are flying out of the yard. Oregon had 21 hits in game 2. 21 hits to put up 13 runs. So the Ducks are 9-3 on the year. Pac-12 play begins this week, a 3-game stint in Tempe against Arizona State. Pretty sure they have the day off Thursday, and it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm going to double check that real quick just so I'm not giving you bad information there. We don't want to do that. But 21 hits is a lot. And this was not, they had a 4-game sweep of Lafayette, and then they lost 2 of 3 to a UC Santa Barbara team that, despite a 5-5 record, is still in the top 25 nationally for college baseball. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Arizona State Pac-12 play begins. And, for Oregon, yeah, you want to win your Pac-12 games and see if you can get a regular season championship or, get close to it and everything like that. But just keep winning. Just win series. Don't have to go in and win all 3 games against ASU. Get 2 of 3, walk out of it and say, okay, went into the desert, won 4 out of 5, and go on 11-4 in the next week. That'd be a pretty good place to be. But the bats were cold against UC Santa Barbara. The weather was cold, but they've gone down to the desert. You got some sunshine, and what do you know? The ball's jumping off the bat. And I think that the bad weather doesn't suit Oregon's team very well, because it can be hard to hit when it's colder like that. Now, it can be harder to pitch as well. And Oregon's pitching, typically not as good. They're hitting very good. Both those things, gets more difficult in the rain. Kind of a slugfest. So the bats heating up is really, really encouraging. And they're really hitting the cover off the baseball these last couple of games. We'll see what happens with a jump in competition a little bit against Arizona State. But good couple of games for the Ducks, and they're 9-3 on the year. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.